Welcome to the Venus and Mars Show, and we, as usual, are so happy to have you with us tonight.
Yes, we are.
I'm Peter, or Mars.
And I'm Ann, Venus.
Tonight we have award-winning author Auston Habershaw with us tonight. Ann?
Award-winning for sure. He's not only a college professor in English and works, through the school year, he also buckles down through the summer and works, makes it a full-time job to push out a book, if not a novel, every single year.
Yes, over a dozen books that he's written. So, how's everything going?
Good, thank you.
Been
And
up
you?
to?
Just hoping the weather will change, be a little more like spring.
Seems like that's all we talk about is the weather.
Lingering on.
Just two quick things. I was in a couple of music videos that I was in January and February have been released, and I'm proud to be part of them. Two very proficient or well-known bands, not in my circles, but they're younger generation. One was a band out of Michigan, I Prevail, a Depression song, which I played the lead singer's father, and another one which was a little bit, definitely not really my kind of music, called rap music, but an artist named Token, and I played the Mr. Big, kind of the jerk promoter trying to make him sign.
The contract.
It was a lot of fun, yeah. It was just, had a ball doing it.
Yeah.
But anyway, shall we bring on Auston Habershaw?
I would love to. Thank you, Auston. I want to introduce everybody to Auston Habershaw. He is an English professor with a college.
Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences.
Welcome to our show,
Thank you.
Auston. Good to have you here.
And
tonight.
also an author.
Yes.
Well,
So
yes.
many times over, though.
I've published 4 novels and probably 16, 17 short stories.
And how long does it normally take for you to write a novel?
At this point, my rate is I write about a novel a year.
Do you know, and then when you go from writing it to publishing it, how long in between?
It depends. It varies a fair amount, but as a general rule, so with my first book, I submitted it to a publisher. They sat on it for 18 months. Then they agreed to publish it, and then it was actually fairly quickly. I think it was about 6 or 7 months before it came out.
Okay.
So that was like 2 years, but it can be anywhere from a year to 2 years to longer to
Yeah.
shorter. It depends on the publishing house and so on.
And the reason that I'm asking is because we've had many authors on the show previously. Some of them have gone as long as 10 years just getting one book
Yeah.
published.
Yeah.
And here you are pumping out novels one a year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everybody writes at their own pace, and everybody has their own method of doing this. Because I am teaching, the academic year is kind of set up that during the summer I have the most time. I mean, I have duties at the college, but not that many. So I can really focus on writing during the summer. So I try and get as much writing as I can done in that 3 or 4 month period, and that is usually enough for me to get a rough draft done. And then I can do editing over the breaks and stuff. And I generally have a workable novel, at least for the past several years. I've been doing it once a year.
Now, Auston, do you specialize in a certain genre or several genres?
I am a science fiction and fantasy author primarily.
Solely?
Yes.
Or
Pretty much, yeah. I have thought about writing in other genres, but I generally have not. This is really the genre that I consider home.
What triggered or stimulated you to follow this genre,
Well,
I guess?
That's a big question.
I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a little kid.
Right, yeah.
Still, I did.
Well, I don't know. I think that's something that's very hard to isolate. Exactly why I wanted to do it. I've always been a big fan of science fiction. I loved Star Wars as a kid. I read The Hobbit when I was a little kid, and I've been inspired by a lot of those things. But a lot of people do that, and they don't end up being me. I couldn't say precisely. I think generally, science fiction and fantasy very much appeals to people who like to sort of leave reality for a little while and really imagine something totally different and totally new, and really like getting immersed in that totally alien thing. And so I've always really liked that, so I think that appeals
Yeah,
to me.
we just watched, not that this has anything to do with it, but I just watched The Thing the other day.
Oh, right,
The
yeah.
1982
John-
Thing.
yeah, John
the John
Carpenter,
Carpenter.
yeah.
We just watched it 2 or 3 days ago.
That's
and I
great.
liked it so much again that I actually watched the making of it. We got
Nice.
the interviews. Anyway, so the science fiction, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, the Thing is fantastic. I am...
Well done. It was
yeah,
well, I don't know
no,
if
it's
you
well
ever saw
done.
it. It was
No,
well
I
done.
haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's about a shape-shifting alien that keeps replacing people in the South
Yeah.
Pole. It's really neat.
Assimilating them.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I read a short story once by someone who wrote it from the point of view of the Thing, which was really neat because they're kind of presenting it as this creature that didn't quite understand what was going on.
Yeah, that is interesting
Because
now to think about.
it didn't get what human beings were. It thought it was totally bizarre that they only had like one form, and it wasn't sure how to communicate with people, and it was generally disgusted and confused. And so it was really interesting. I can't remember.
Well, if
who
it didn't
wrote
get frozen in the ice, it would have woke up. I mean, 100,000 years. That's how long it was in there.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't
yeah.
be dealing with us. It would have been dealing with.
Oh, sure. It was.
Neanderthals
Yeah, it
or
was. It didn't know what was going on.
Not to get
So-
okay.
but anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you find this to be a stress reliever, a hobby? How do you classify
Well,
working over the
stress
summer?
not defining it as a hobby. And the problem with defining writing as a hobby is hobbies are permitted to be interrupted and aren't important to other people. It's not a hobby, it's a job. I treat it like a job. So when I'm writing, I am working, and therefore I'm not available to help you move your sofa or do anything else. Because, people will regularly intrude on your writing time. And if you're going to write a novel, particularly if you're planning on writing a novel in 3 months, you can't allow people to intrude on your writing time. It's like, no, I am
Understood.
writing now. I am not going to talk to you in the same way I wouldn't talk to you if I were at work.
Exactly.
And so it is a professional vocation for me. A stress reliever is debatable. It's a different kind of stress compared to the kind of stress I would have teaching, in which, like when I'm teaching and stuff, it's stressful in the sense that I have a lot of work to do and I'm balancing a lot of classes and I got a lot of people I got to talk to and I'm running around and I'm tired and so on. But I'm not really like stressed in the sense that I'm not really worried about how it's all going to turn out. Like, I know the semester will end and I will grade these papers and some students will succeed and some won't, and so on
Right.
and so forth. And so it's not like stressful. Whereas a novel, I am not running around like a crazy person. In fact, a lot of it is very contemplative. A lot of it involves me sitting there and staring at the wall. So it's not very fast-paced or tense in that way. But it is stressful in the sense that you're trying to create something really good, and you're constantly battling self-doubt about whether or not it is in fact good.
I was just going to touch on a point now that you led into it. I think like any other endeavor, you always say something like if you do a voiceover or something, they're unique. When you do a voiceover, you can very rarely do it, you can't do it the same way. They're
Right,
always-
yeah.
When you write a book, you got 3 months to do it.
Yeah.
How do you finally let go and say, this is enough? In other words, this is good enough, but you could do it differently.
Which brings me to another point, because when I sat and I actually talked to Auston about coming on the show and being a guest, I asked him about writer's block. So,
Okay.
Well, you can address both, I guess.
Okay.
because it kind of ties together,
They
don't
do
you think?
tie together. They do tie together. Okay. I have sort of a controversial opinion about writer's block in that I don't think it actually exists, at least not in the way people think of it. The way people think of writer's block, or when you say, sometimes even when you say you're blocked, what you are saying is that like, oh, I don't know what to do, I can't create anything, I'm stuck and there's nothing that can happen. And that's not true. What that really means is I am afraid that what I am about to do won't be any good, which is a significant concern, but also one that can easily be circumvented by just saying, okay, I guess it won't be any good. Because the first draft of everything you write is going to be garbage anyway. I mean, Ernest Hemingway famously said that. except he didn't say garbage. He used a naughtier word that I will not use. But
G-rated.
yeah, that's why I figured it was G-rated. But yeah, so yeah, your first draft is gonna end up being bad. Like it's just gonna.
Yeah.
And so you need to give yourself permission to fail. And what that means is if you're stuck and you're like, oh man, I don't know that this is gonna work. Well, you know what? Just keep going anyway and get to the point where it will be good again, or skip the next chapter and go to another chapter. Just keep going, keep going. And the point of the first draft is to create this huge chunk of raw material that later on you're going to whittle down and hone into something that's really good, which connects to the thing that you were asking, which is when do you know you're done, which is this whole other problem, because if left to your own devices, it is very easy to keep honing and honing and
Yes,
chipping and
that's what I
chipping
would
until
not
it
letting go.
never ends, right? And
Perfectionist.
some of my early novels, like the first novel I wrote, I was a senior in college, and then I started revising it, and all I did was rewrite the first chapter 10 million times, which was a waste of time. It was just stupid. Like, why? I should have just kept going. And so my rule from then on was I am not rewriting anything until I finish the whole draft.
It's all about the psychology behind
Right.
it.
Well,
yeah.
you're always in a battle with
Yeah.
yourself when you're
Yeah.
writing, right? Because you're constantly assailing yourself with self-doubt, and you need to get over it. And so you need to get that draft done, and then you got to fix it and fix it and fix it. And there eventually comes a point where you have fixed all the big things. You're done moving furniture and you are now rearranging doilies, right? You're dusting, you're chipping away at little things, you're comparing paint swatches. And it's no longer really a renovation anymore, you're just sort of tidying.
Yeah.
And when you're at that point where you're like, well, I could use this verb or I could use that verb, and that's like the only thing you're doing, I consider that done. Because at that point, you need somebody else to look at it because you've done all you can do by yourself. And you need to give it to somebody. Now, that might be a critique group. That might be sending it into an agent. That might be submitting it to an editor or like whatever that is. But at some point, you know you're done when you're no longer fixing the big stuff and you're just dusting.
Well, here's a personal question I have.
Yeah.
I mean, not personal question. I mean, personal interest.
Yeah.
Let's take the word rancid.
Okay.
Okay. Oftentimes when I write in not books, I'm writing something, whatever. I want to make sure that it's the right synonym. I mean, you know,
The right word.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
rancid, putrid.
Yeah.
You know, there's all sorts of. Do authors do that a lot? To like, in other words,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
You're trying to exaggerate
right,
the point.
and right now my memory is so bad, I can't remember these. I have to look them up. But I'm just saying that.
Well-
oh yeah, this is good. This sounds good.
So, I mean, everybody's process is different, and there's many different ways to write a novel as there are writers. With me, I don't really start to worry so much about sentence-level diction stuff until I'm in, like, the third pass of the book. Like,
Yeah.
the first draft is just getting everything on the table, and the second draft is making sure the plot makes sense and that the characters are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And then the third draft, I start to get into the paragraph and sentence level where I'm like, well, I should move these around or change this verb or strip out these adverbs and that kind of thing. Because I find that, like, until you got the big picture, the little stuff isn't
Yeah.
that important anyway, and so you kind of have to put it off. I remember when I was in graduate school, I was friends with a poet, and she was in this fiction writing seminar with me, and she was freaking out over like little word choice. And this is a short story, you know, it's like a 20-page thing, and she's like, I just keep stressing over one sentence. Because in poetry, right, like that's the thing, right? The scale is like you must get the line perfect. And in short fiction, and then of course in novels, that's not really the most important thing. It is important, and of course, you know, the great authors are good both on a micro level and on a macro level, that like on a sentence level you can look at a great writer and say like, wow, this is a beautiful sentence. But also the whole story works as well. But I generally build from the big down to the little, so I don't really start worrying about the sentence level stuff until later.
It's all funneling.
Do you two remember biology books when they had the frogs?
Yeah.
You know, we
Sure.
they would have the. I think of writing as you have a skeleton, and I don't know if you do that, and then you have an overlay that puts in the plumbing
Yeah.
system, the veins, and you add more detail.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you do it, but
I don't do it that way,
No,
but yeah.
but what I'm saying is you don't do a chapter at a time completely through, and then you have levels. You get the whole book written.
Yeah.
And then
But again, that's his psychology behind
Right,
it.
Yeah,
like
that's what I'm
there's all
trying- that's
different
what
ways
I'm
to do it.
thinking.
Some
Yeah.
people don't write their book in order. They write it out of order. They
Yeah.
just have, they write chapters here and there. I write it in order. I start chapter 1, I finish chapter 1, I go
Once
to chapter
upon
2.
a time.
Yeah, like, and then I just keep going sequentially. And then occasionally there'll be chapters that I'm like, I know I'm going to chop this out later. This is just garbage, but I'm just getting through it
Yep.
just so I can move on. And then I get to the end and I've got, you know, the whole thing. And until I can see the whole thing, I don't really know what needs to go and stay.
Austin, is that one of your latest books?
So
there?
this is actually my first novel, but this
Hold
is
on up for the
here,
people
hold
at
on.
home.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Right, so this is the first book in my fantasy series called The Oldest Trick. The name of the series is called The Saga of the Redeemed. It's published through Harper Voyager. The last book of this series was just published this March.
Ooh.
So this was published maybe 5 years ago, maybe 4, 5 years? Well, I don't know. Let's see. It doesn't really matter.
No.
It was published a couple of years ago, and the last one was published this March. So the whole series is complete. I started work on that book probably 8 or 9 years ago, at least, maybe 10. And that one took the longest to write, and then it's also the longest of them. And then I got more into a system after that. I wasn't as organized with this book as I was with the later ones, which is not to say that I think it's a bad book. It's quite good, but I think. But it's from a method point of view, like writing novels is a thing that you get better at the more you practice it.
You
it's a
mentioned this
skill.
as a series. Can
This
a
is a
person
series.
read it out of order? Or they should read them in order. That's what I'm
You
getting.
actually you can read them out of order to some extent because each of the books, particularly the first 3, kind of stand on their own. But you'll miss a lot
Okay.
because
Yeah, there's
they
references
reference stuff that happened in the early books. They are dealing with the same characters, so it's probably best if you start with the first and go through to the fourth. I specifically wrote the third one in such a way that you could pick it up and read it and kind of figure it out. And I did the same thing with the second.
Do they take place on the Earth or somewhere
No,
else?
it's what's called the secondary world. So it's like like Westeros for the Game of Thrones or Middle
Yeah,
Earth.
okay.
It's like another world. It's roughly a sort of 16th, 17th century kind of thing, rather than medieval. It's
Okay,
It's sort
yeah.
of a Renaissance era in which there's magic is widespread and readily available, almost like technology. They have like trains that run on demons that are trapped in a bottle and all kinds of stuff like that. And the story deals with a smuggler of sorcerous artifacts who is this brilliant mastermind and sort of a villain, kind of a jerk, who gets portrayed by his partner and left for dead. And the person who rescues him puts a ring on his finger that won't let him do evil anymore. And if he tries to do bad, it gives him a shock.
Jeez, I wish we
essentially.
could get a lot of those.
I
rings
know.
all
I know,
outside.
right. And so
Start with me.
the first book is very much about this guy, Tivian, trying to get revenge on his partner without being bad, which is extremely difficult. And he's very angry about it. And the whole story is called The Saga of the Redeemed because ultimately what it's about is about this character going from being a selfish, self-involved prick, basically, to becoming a better person.
You know this is a G rating.
I didn't think that was is that not? That's definitely
It's
not one of
good,
Carlin's
yeah.
5 words.
You're good.
Sorry, Austin.
But no, so it's a redemption arc, but it's a very long one because one of the things that I love redemption stories. One of the things that I always find a little frustrating about redemption stories is that they're so quick. Like suddenly a light bulb goes off and they're like, oh, well, I'm a nice person now. And it's like, no, that's not really how it works.
No, that's not reality.
No, so Tivian gets a little bit better in the first book, then he regresses. Then he gets a little bit better in the second book, then he regresses. And he's constantly you're always going like, oh, really, why are you doing that? Because he's not, as much as he's very clever and he's very smart and he's very cool and he has he's a devastatingly good swordsman and everything, he's not a really good person at self-denial. He is very vain and he has all sorts of flaws that he has to work through.
How about vulgar language and sexuality and all that? Is that?
It's not, I mean, it's certainly not on the level of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
There are swears in the book, but they're invented.
You're right. Okay. No. Right.
So they're
right.
not usually the same swears that we use.
And you have beasts and creatures.
Yeah.
and,
So one of his compatriots is a speaking, or is called the Knoll. It's basically like a part lion, part dog, part person. And she's extremely fierce and very, very
sounds like the
dangerous.
Thing that couldn't make up his mind.
Yeah, well, she's like, kind of picture like almost like a werewolf
Yeah.
kind of individual.
I know
except
somebody
she doesn't
like
change.
that.
She doesn't change shape. In the first book, she's looking for her puppies, and boy, the people who have stolen them are in big trouble because Hool is very dangerous. And so yeah, there's creatures and things, and there's magic and there's conspiracies. I've kind of said it's almost like James Bond, but in a fantasy magical setting.
Are there taverns?
Of course, there are taverns. Yeah, there's taverns and there's the occasional bar fight and all the good tentpole stuff is there. There's swinging from chandeliers and duels and magical explosions and.
Well, I look forward to reading this
Sorceress
first
cabals.
Trick. I'm going to read that.
All right, well,
Not that one,
please
but
do.
Yeah, no.
And when you created this, did you know in its infancy with the first one that it was going to be a series?
Yes,
You
I
did.
thought it was going to be a much longer series, but
How
that
did
was.
you know when to end?
I had 9 books planned out.
Oh my goodness.
And then the realities of the publishing world set in. It's like, well, I mean, the first book was not a hit. I mean, it did okay, but it wasn't a hit. So I wasn't going to write like 1 million books. And so I had to curtail it to 4, which is enough. The story is complete. I left it open that if like someday I want to do more, I could. But right now it's just the 4. And now I'm working on other novels and
So
things.
when I Google you,
Yeah.
very nice picture, by the way,
Thank
and
you.
the advertising that goes on. You've got a series of books in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that can't be all of them because you really only capture? I think it's only 3 or 4. Is that just these?
These are the novels. Yeah. So
Okay.
if you see, those are the novels, and then also on my Amazon page or Goodreads page, you'll see a lot of links to short stories I've published in anthologies.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just me, but like there's be a story of mine among other people.
And if people wanted to follow you, you're on Facebook, you're on Twitter.
So yeah, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter. The main platform I use for publicity is my website, which is aahabershaw.com.
Okay.
And you can go there and you can follow that. And it's a blog that I post maybe twice a month and keep people updated on stuff and write articles about writing and gaming and all kinds of
Do you
stuff.
go around and do book signings? Do you do the
I
tour?
do, yeah. I don't always do broad tours, but I am having a book signing, for instance, a week from now, or for when this is being taped. So on May 9th, in Pandemonium Books and Games in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right in Central Square.
Oh,
I'll
very
be doing a
close
book
to
signing
home.
at 7 p.m. to 9, and I'll be reading from my latest book, and I'll be signing books and talking to fans and stuff. So, and it's free, so people are welcome to come. It's a great store, too. It's a great place.
Yeah.
So I do that, and I often go to conventions as well. I go to the World Fantasy Convention, the World Science Fiction Convention, and BosCon and ReaderCon, which are local conventions, and you can usually find me there.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's
That's
pretty
wonderful. So now you've got a new one coming out too. Let's tell the folks at home.
fun. Well, so there's one I'm working on now, which is a time travel novel. I don't have a deal for it yet, so it's not going to come out yet, but one hopes.
Okay.
But it's a time travel novel which has a Boston connection because the main character is from Boston. He's a low-level criminal and a failed professional boxer, and they give this guy, who's kind of a dumb, violent thug, a time machine, and they tell him, "You owe us $1 billion." And so he has to figure out how to steal $1 billion across time and space. And he has all of time to do it, right? So he feels like this is a great deal, but he very quickly figures out that stealing $1 billion is a lot of money. And he's not that hard a worker, and he gets very, very frustrated, and it becomes sort of a caper and stuff, and he starts trying to rob himself, and it gets really, really
Now, does he go? I mean, just maybe you don't want to answer it, but does he go in the past or does he go in the future?
Both.
Okay.
He goes all over.
I
the
figured
place.
it's easier to get $1 billion in the future.
Well, yeah, but then
Right?
they account for inflation.
No,
So like
no.
the future money, and also you can't always use the future money in the past. So
okay.
anyway, it gets very complicated. But
Right.
yeah, I'm pretty excited about that book, but it's not a done
Well, we
deal
just want to
yet.
tease them at home
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they follow you.
Yes.
They can start out and
Sure,
know
I
your
hope
work
you
so
will
that
get
we
to hear
can
about that soon. So,
head
yeah.
on down the path.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Really.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
I mean, that's a lot of books. If you write a book a year, you might have 50 more books left
That's
in your
what I
life.
hope. That's the plan.
Well, you might.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, I won't be around to read them all, but
Oh, don't sell yourself short. Medical science is quite
oh
advanced.
no, I'll be propped up. I don't think Ann wants to be around
No.
for 50 more years.
Like Rose Kennedy
We'll
up
still-
in the
we'll-
window.
no, we'll have our show for 50 more years.
Well, thank you so much,
you.
Austin,
Yeah.
for being here.
Thank
we
you
look
for
forward
coming on
to
our show, yes.
Yeah, having you again
Yes.
when you
Great.
write some more.
Oh, I look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Wow, a book a year, huh? He's already got what?
Not just
16
a
or
book; it's a novel.
16 or 17 books already. You know he's was born the year we graduated from high school.
Do you have to say stuff?
Well,
like
no,
that?
I just meant that it's just he's prodigious, is what I'm saying, for his writing. I mean, that's a lot of that is a lot.
But he treats it like a job. So
Yeah.
when he's done doing his professor gig during the
he's,
school year, then he just buckles down and does a
But he-
full-time job during the summer to write and push out another book.
He did say 16 or 17, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Auston Habershaw, quite an accomplished author, and I hope that you take the time and read his books. I know I'm going to. What
And
about
I
you,
look
Ann?
forward to the
Yeah.
one that he's working
The
on
first-
now,
well,
too.
Yeah. But I think we
Yeah.
ought to read the first one.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that wraps it up for our show tonight. I'm Peter, or Mars.
And I'm Ann, Venus.
Where planets align, but often
Collide.
Until next time,
Thank you for watching.
have a good night.